Go. Okay. Well, it looks like we are live. I should check my second channel, make sure it's working properly. It should be.
Oh, now I get the alert from Discord. Oh, there's a live stream.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Okay, cool. And we are live. So welcome everybody. Welcome. This is a series called Fascinating People. It's for people who sign up for the Patreon to the level where I get to interview them, which is awesome because that means somebody's paying me to interview them, which means I get to do something that I rarely get to do, which is talk about somebody else. And I really like that. I really enjoy that because being a YouTuber, especially like working out of a studio by myself, most of the time I'm just sitting here talking to myself or, well, to the camera about myself. And frankly, I'm pretty bored with myself. So everybody welcome Sera. Hello, Sera.
Hello.
And how are you today?
It's my day off. I requested it off to do this interview.
Awesome. Fantastic. Cool. I am honored you're taking some time out of your busy day. What do you do for work, if you don't mind me saying?
So, I technically work 3 jobs, 2 on paper and 1 helping my dad who suffers from great dementia. It's premature onset dementia, so I help out. So if you hear dogs or him, that's what's going on in the background. So fourth Warren. 2 of the jobs I work for a company that's kind of like Walmart and like Target. I work for a company like that, like retail.
Okay.
And then a second job I've done since I was 18, like literally the day after my 18th birthday, I work for healthcare, specifically caregiving. So I've been doing that since I literally turned 18.
Okay. Absolutely. I used to work for a company that took care of developmentally disabled adults.
That's what I do. Exactly what I do.
It's a tough but rewarding job.
It is.
Oh.
And it's finally being recognized after the pandemic of what pay we should be getting. And that was,
Really?
yeah, like, well, at least in my state. We're from different states. So during the pandemic, we were paid very poorly.
Right.
Or not, or as low as they can get us at, right? And so many people just
Of course.
partake, but it doesn't stick. And that's the kind of downside about it, is that caregiving is such in high demand and the pay wasn't worth it at the time, but nowadays it's up there. I think I get paid like $20 an hour because I'm like first aid certified. I can do CPR, I can do all that, training-esque, and you get paid for it and it's rewarding.
That's fantastic. It was when I got into it, I think they paid like 50 cents more than minimum wage. It was not very
Yeah,
much.
exactly.
Yeah. And
No.
it's a tough job. It is a really tough job. But like I said, it really is. It's a different kind of rewarding than you'll ever experience from another type of job. It's I don't know. It's fascinating. I really did enjoy it. But I when I ended up stopping doing it was because I went to college, which that didn't turn out too terribly well either.
Don't feel bad. I've put college on hold just to do work and then proceed back into it.
Sure, absolutely. What did you go to college for?
So I've been looking at college since I think I graduated early. So like I was like 17. That's kind of like how I discovered you because I was just dicking off on YouTube one day. So I was like looking at college stuff because like you were asking because so during my high school years I went to physical school like nearby and I just fucking hated it. So my mom's like, well, what do you want to do? What's an alternative we can do? And I said,
Right.
we can do online schooling. And I was dating my high school sweetheart at the time, and he was doing it, and he was doing quite well for the person he is. And I'm like, okay, I'll give that a shot. It was a different school, but I gave it a shot, and I think I graduated like 8 months, 6 months early. Everything passed. Mind you, I am not a math person, and I think I got like a C or a B or C in that class.
Yeah.
Because I remember doing like staying up late for overnights, like just till like 3 o'clock in the morning, finishing all my finals, finishing everything.
Oh yeah.
And then my mentor, Miss M, she contacted my mom. She's like, "Did Sarah go to bed last night?" Her mom calls you asleep? Yeah, yeah, what's what? Alright. And then she contacted the mentor, and that was that. They were
Sure.
just amazed by the pure, like, dedication, I think, or
Yeah.
just that I wasn't gonna do the work. And I'm like, no, I'll do the work. I just don't like being around people.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody learns differently, right? I mean, there's I think a lot of the problems that we have with American school is the rigidity of it and how you're really only supposed to learn a very specific certain way and you have to have these types of requirements and blah blah blah, but that doesn't work for everybody.
No, even with me having like siblings, like foster siblings, adopted siblings, and biologically related siblings, like half and full,
Mm,
it was so different based on what our needs were and based on what resources we had to provide it.
no.
So both my parents and my dad being a stepfather to my two older brothers both had to take on those challenges, and I think they did a fantastic job based on what was provided to them.
Yeah.
No.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so you had adopted siblings as well?
Yes. So my parents ran a foster care in my early years when I was
Okay.
like get stopped before my youngest sister was born. Like my mom got pregnant in I want to say '04, and then later, like I think summertime '05, baby sister was born.
Okay.
And so before those years, she ran so she had a daycare that ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It never stopped, pretty much.
Oh, wow.
And she ran it with my dad. I call this other woman who was like my nanny. She's like my second mom. I call her my second mom. So when people ask, how many moms do you have? I'm like, I have two moms because this woman raised me pretty much.
Right.
And then so the daycare was for normal kids and for disabled kids, like kids that just had mentally delayed or just had issues. They would go there, and my
Mhm.
parents would raise them. So my mom had this particular person she took care of, was much older than me. I think she was even older than my brothers.
Mm,
But she took care of her, and I think the plan was before, unfortunately, she passed away due to cancer, was that her parents couldn't do it no more.
mhm.
And this was obviously like later after the daycare was done and all that. But let's fast forwarding the story. So it's say she passed away in 2011 in April, like no March, because now today's the anniversary, and she passed away.
Right.
And yeah, she would think her birthday was on Easter. I remember that because Easter's normally in April.
Right.
So I know she died like I think a week or two before her birthday, and she had cancer, and my parents were like thinking about adopting her. Now I just consider her my adopted sibling as my
Sure.
sister because literally she's been around since I was a baby. Like I have baby photos of me with her, and I'm like, that's my adopted sister.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't matter if it was official. She's my adopted sister. She's my family, and it was sad when she died.
Yeah. Yeah, that's rough. I love that though. That's an incredible amount of like compassion and dedication, you know. That's
Oh yeah,
great.
oh yeah. Given that my parents are two opposite people, they found a coexisting relationship to where that's kind of even how they met is through caregiving, like
Mhm.
healthcare services in general. That's how they met, and that was what they were bred to do. Honestly,
Sure.
they met, they coincided, they realized their differences and what they needed to achieve, and they founded the daycare. And we had so many people from different walks of life come in,
Hmm.
and so many kids. I think we had at most, I want to say, 20 to 50 kids at not at a time, but depending on how bad it was or how frequent it was. But I think at most we had 20. No, at most we had 50. At least we had 20. I'm pretty
Wow.
sure. Yeah, and our house isn't that big, but we have a big backyard, so it kind of worked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you weren't hurting for playmates, that's for sure.
No, no, there's plenty of we did I think we did St. Patty's Day parties. We had an Easter party here with all my cousins. We did Easter egg hunts and had the Easter bunny, which was really just one of my brother's friends dressed up as the Easter bunny. And
That's adorable.
we had Oh my, there's Jeff. Like if I could have photos, I would be sending them. It's a lot. It's very humbling and it's very thoughtful.
Yeah, yeah.
Like my mom like bought barrels of hay and she threw it all over in the backyard and like
Oh man.
we had like those big barrels of hay and we had them against our fence which we share with our neighbor and we had him pushed against like his bush area,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily a garden but those hedges pushed it against and there's a photo of all the daycare kids, of me and my twin sister and of every kid that attended and we're all wearing like this bright ass neon green shirts that have like the name on it and we all took photos and it was really like that's what I remember of my childhood is like my parents going above and beyond, not just for their two young daughters at the time but for their
For all the kids,
sons, to
yeah,
their
yeah.
for all the kids, yeah,
Yeah.
for kids that they weren't their blood, they didn't need to,
Man.
they love they like appreciated these kids. Like I remember one Christmas the mayor of my city came with Mrs. Claus and Santa Claus and like I remember just getting woke up out of a dead sleep as a little kid and being told that Santa was here. I'm like, what the hell? And I go walk out. There's the mayor of my city at the time, which was in '04,
Mm.
which I think she was like Lisa something. I don't know her last name, but her first name was Lisa. So there was the mayor. There was Mrs. Claus, all like dainty and elegant, and then there's Santa Claus. I'm like, holy fucking shit! As a kid, like, what the fuck is going on? And all the kids are just sitting there waiting for me as like an assembly. Like I think my mom was in the photo, if I remember correctly. My mom was next to the mirror, and they took a photo, and I think it was in our local paper. I'm pretty sure.
Huh. That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
you don't usually get that kind of thing. At least, I mean, oh, how big of a town was it?
Well, I live in a very dank town, as you and Ben were reviewing Mr. Cobra and his fine mistress.
Ah,
You guys were broading up Detroit, and I live in an area called Metro Detroit, which is like northeast, kind of that way,
okay.
towards the thumb of Michigan.
Right, right.
And I live in a very very quaint town, a very small town.
Yeah.
Not really town, it's a city, but I call it a town because it's the type of city you literally just drive right through. That's how I describe it because it's
Sure.
literally it's like 4 square miles. That's how small it is.
That's cool. But I mean, like, you get that sort of thing with that kind of a town. Well, you hope to,
Hmm.
where you can have a mayor bringing over like Mr. and Mrs. Claus for Christmas. That's just awesome. I love that. Um, so you were mentioning about your parents that they were like almost complete opposites. What do you mean by that?
So we like to refer to my mom as a spider. Now I don't know what you would know what a spider does, especially the females, but like they like to be hunters naturally.
Mm.
That's just who they are. They like they we pretty much call her my dad as a sloth because all he does is sleep and he's very slow and he's very stern and he's just an old Irish man.
Okay.
He's bred like that's just he's that stereotype. He's an old Irish man.
Mm.
And my mom isn't a Eastern Italian, Prussian, which Prussia doesn't exist no more, but Russia, Poland woman
Right.
naturally. So they just fucking butt heads like motherfucker.
Sure.
So we say my mom's a spider and my mom just seduced the sloth and had two bulls and a lion, which
Aw.
would, if you know zodiacs, you would know that.
Yep.
Two, Tauruses and a Leo, and
Yep.
like, god damn, like,
It's pretty good.
especially as I get.
Yep.
Oh yeah, well,
That's pretty good.
well, yeah, like the first time my mom like met my dad, it was fucking the weirdest shit. Like when you hear the stories, they don't sound fucking real. They sound made up. Like that didn't fucking happen. And when she seduced my dad, it took him 3 days for my mom to ask, "Are you gay?" And my dad's like, "Fuck no, what the fuck?" And then they had me and my twin sister, and that's how it happened. Obviously, details are being left out, but that's
Fair
my
enough.
mom in a nutshell. It's my mom in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. Knows what
She's
she wants and just pursues it and gets it. Yeah.
she very much so. That's why we call her a spider,
Yep.
because she is so set on something, and when she's set on it, like she knows her value. She's strong-willed. She knows who she is as not like as an older woman, but as a woman in general. She's that like 80s boss bitch, and I know that sounds cliche to say, but that's who she was
It
when
makes
she had
sense.
my brother. That's why when she had my brothers, she didn't give a fuck.
Hmm.
And then she got remarried to married, quote unquote, not legally, but married to my dad and had us siblings.
Nice. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's strange how opposites attract like that. I know very much the lazy Irishman type. It's burned into my memory. I can picture it perfectly. And like a strong Eastern European, Northern Ireland or Northern Italy kind of woman, just being like, "No, mine." That's perfect. That's
Oh
fantastic.
yeah, my dad's also the type of man who's so robotic. Like he's not emotional. My mom's heavily emotional woman, but
Okay.
that balances out my dad's roboticness because we're a family of just it's the stories. Honestly, it's the best way to like family. I don't want to say misfits because that's kind of misleading it, but like a
Sure.
family that just has stories. Like my mom always says, if I could fucking write a book, it would be a bestseller. I'm like, then why don't you go write it, ma? She's like, maybe I will then, and I'm like, go ahead, go ahead.
Just got to challenge her into it.
Oh yeah, dude. We have stories for days, Jeff. Like
Yeah.
legit.
Yeah, I very much I enjoy people that you can challenge them into doing stuff. Because a lot of times you'll meet people who, to try and get them to do something that you think is a good idea, you have to kind of convince them that it's their idea. But if you have somebody
Mm.
who like likes dares and you dare them into something and they get really inspired by it, I love that. Those are great traits that I get very excited about whenever I make a friend of somebody that's like that. I respond well to it.
Mm. Yeah, like it's. Excuse me, I burped. Apologize. No, it's like naturally all like, even as I grew up as as my mature into my mid 20s now, I noticed that I've become more my mother. I'm like, God fucking damn it, ma. Fucking A, man. Spider tendencies, spider senses tingling. What the fuck is this?
Sure. Well, like, what do you identify in yourself that's becoming more prevalent like that?
I'm much more demanding
Yeah.
than I was as a young teenager, especially a very gullible, naive teenager. I'm much more demanding. I'm naturally I'm a hopeless romantic, but I want what my mom had as a young woman, which she would have men just bring her flowers and
Mm.
just like I said, she knew what she wanted. She was very stern and she did not accept less. That's just who my mother naturally is.
Good.
And as I've matured, I've seen that in myself. I'm like, God damn it, mom.
I think
Damn it. And it's
that's a
just
good trait though. That's a really good trait.
it's a good trait, but it can also become it's like double-edged sword, as I call it, because it could come across as very controlling. So it has to be really finely tuned a little bit.
I guess so. Yeah, what's everything in moderation, including moderation. I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um
well,
yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, like I said, it's just one of those things again.
Okay. So, well, with this kind of an upbringing, like having lots and lots of people in the house. Well, and also the other one that I was kind of curious about. So you were saying that you had all these playmates because there was this daycare going on. You had
Mhm.
adopted siblings. When did the daycare end, and why did that happen?
So that goes back on when my oldest brothers, they are 18 months apart,
Hmm.
and they were teenagers. I think they were like teenagers. Some of them were still like over the age of 18, so young adult, like late teens, early 20s, people.
Okay.
So it ended when my mom discovered she was pregnant with my youngest sister,
Gotcha.
and she had to make a decision because they were gonna be foster parents. Like that was the way they were gonna go. And my
Hmm.
dad, I remember very distinctly as a young child, like going into my father's bedroom because they just slept separately because they just wanted their own sleep. And so they would go in their own rooms, and then sometimes I'd find my mom in my dad's room. And I remember them sitting adjacent to each other, and I would be in my mother's lap, and my twin sister, would be in my father's lap.
Hmm.
And I remember them talking very openly, very honestly of what they need to do, like communicating just naturally how couples do.
Right. Or should.
And I remember definitely, and I remember them like saying like what was happening, and like my mom saying, what were they going to do, what were they were going to, how was it going to be, where do they want to go with the daycare,
Mm.
everything else. And obviously there's conversations when I was in private school that I just didn't know about.
Of course.
So so when my mom discovered she was pregnant, my dad just made a decision for them, and he just took the plaques off the wall and he just gave it back to the people that they did the training with, saying, "I don't want to do this no more.
Right.
You know, I have a daughter coming. We can't do this. I'm sorry." Like he, for all intents and purposes, my dad was a very active man before he got sick,
Right.
and he gives a shit about his two twin daughters so much that he wasn't going to consider putting a baby in that, because maybe that was just too much for her, for his two youngest kids at the time,
Right.
his wife and himself. Like, he just couldn't do it, and sometimes that's okay.
Yeah.
So he just handed the plaque back. I think it was a woman. I'm pretty sure it was a woman, and just handed it back and said, "Here, like, I just can't do it." No.
Right.
And I think that was after my mom had said to my dad that she was pregnant. And I think because at first my mom thought she was sick, naturally, because she was with my adopted sister.
Okay.
And she, was doing something and then had dropped her off somewhere. And then obviously my mom had just felt really sick. She ended up going to the doctor and being told, like, "Oh, you're pregnant." And she's like, "How did that happen?" And the
Well-
doctor's like, "Ma'am." I'm like, the doctor was like, "Ma'am, you are in your 40s. Do I have to explain?" She's like, "I know how it happened, but how did it happen?" And then they proceeded to say, "This baby will be a Halloween baby." And then I think what ended up happening, or no, what ended up happening later on was that after my dad gave up the plaque, my mom went to her ultrasound and found out, obviously, the gender and how big the baby was. And she was farther along than originally suspected. And they're like, "Shoot for late summer."
Oh wow.
And then, yeah, she was much more farther along. And at the time, they were really, because of how much medicine my mom was taking, they were really worried about the health of the baby.
Yeah.
Because they're like, they don't know. My mom is an older woman at the time. This was her last baby. We didn't know how the pregnancy was going to go. But by the time of my youngest sister's, birth, she was the heaviest baby. She was the healthiest baby my mom had.
Oh.
And she's doing, besides a few things, she's doing just fine,
That's fantastic. So how old were you when this was
At
happening?
this time,
Yeah.
I was between the ages of 4 when the daycare started,
Yeah.
probably like late 3, early 4,
Yeah.
and then I was 6 years old when my youngest sister was born.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
Gotcha.
you're looking at like the early 2000s. This is the timeline.
Right. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Well, how was life after that?
So life after that was relative. Obviously the recession hit and it was shitty for everybody.
Oh yeah.
And,
I didn't even
and
think about that. Ugh.
the recession really hit us hard. And I remember being a kid and seeing my two older brothers. And like, when you're a kid, you want to hang out with your older siblings. Even if you're 13, 14, 15 years apart, you want to hang out with them. And then naturally, me and my twin sister would gravitate towards our older brothers. But since they were young adults, you know how that usually went. They want to go party and do young men activities.
Yes. Yep. I know.
So
Yeah, my brother was 12 years older than me. I know.
yeah, so it's like, like, I remember the one good thing my brothers at least did at the time was give me and my sister our first game system, which was Nintendo 64.
Excellent.
That's how we got that's how we got introduced to video games.
Excellent.
So I think we played like Mario Kart, and my sister would always kick my ass because she was always fucking Toad. And I think we had like another like console game, which was Mortal Kombat 2, and that's what began my affair with it.
Oh yeah.
And I liked that game especially because there was the twin sisters, Melina and Katana, and me and my twin sister would always argue who was Melina, who was Katana. Like, we would just be at each other like, "No, I'm this."
Gotcha.
And then usually
which one did you want to be?
Katana.
Oh, you
Because
wanted to
we would always argue about Melina's like mouth and how grotesque it was. And then we would always like jab each other about that, but the way around that one was my twin sister would always use fucking Baraka and his scissor slice when he like throws his blades in the air and he just starts slicing it. I'm like, "You fucking ass."
I know this game well.
Yeah.
I'm a big Mortal Kombat fan.
Same here.
So I'm picturing it in my head too. It's great. I was gonna confess that Toad's my main in Mario Kart as well.
Then you and my sister have a lot alike.
Yeah, yeah. He's just so cheaty. He's so cheaty. He's the best.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help it. I get competitive when I play that game, and I like to win. I like to win.
Oh, we did. We very much got competitive as 4, 5, 6 year olds,
Oh, I bet.
and
Yeah, especially
we are.
twins. Twins get really competitive.
Well, see, like with me and my sister, with my mom, I don't know who told her this. I couldn't tell you the person, but she wanted to make sure we weren't ever like dependent on the other. She always strived for us to find our own individuality.
Okay.
Now, as I've gotten older, obviously, I can see we are twins. We share 75% of our same DNA, which makes us fraternal twins.
Yeah.
And we naturally, like, she gravitates towards my dad of decades of that, and I gravitate towards my mom,
Yeah.
which is fine because it's a daughter per person. And but that also creates like issues and underlining, underbellies. But mainly, I kind of thank my mom for that, for making sure we had that sensibility of like our own personality being made pretty much from fucking scratch at a very young age. Like we couldn't depend on the other for like friends or connections. We had to make it as we were just, just a sibling,
Right.
really.
I could see that. Yeah. I suppose if you don't encourage individuality enough, you end up like the Da Vinci twins. I don't know if you know who those are.
Hmm. It sounds familiar, but I've read a lot about twins. I mean, I'm a natural academic person who just introvertedly reads up on articles and statistics, and
Oh, sure. Yeah, no,
actually when
it's they're comedians on like social media, and they're these
Mhm.
two absolute goofball guys with shock straight up blonde hair that talk like this and do all this really funny affirmation stuff. And they like talk constantly together in perfect tune, and they make the worst fucking jokes in the world, but they're hilarious. But like that's kind of like they're so completely similar that that's
Mhm.
kind of just like what popped into my head. If you had no individuality as a twin, you'd end up like
No.
the Da Vincis.
And yeah, and you don't want to ever compare a twin to the other twin because that's how you get into physical fights, I feel.
I bet. Has it happened a lot to you?
It's happens like I remember as even a young child it happening so much. Like people always ask, "What's it like being a twin?" I'm like, "What's it like being a person?"
Yeah,
That's my
sure.
comment now.
Yeah.
What's it like being a person? What's it like having siblings? That's exactly how it is.
Mm.
And especially uh, when we were kids, I was much more smaller, much more weaker, and I'm the oldest daughter, but I'm smaller.
Okay.
And as I've gotten older, you had like at the time a blonde and a brunette, and people would be like, "Oh, this is the angel. This is the devil twin," and I know that bothered my twin a lot because people would always cast aside our personalities and our traits for like mediocre and
Yep. I'm listening. Sorry.
you're good for like mediocre and generic qualities. Because I was more trusting, more kind of soft spoken. I was always deemed a more naturally an angel, and she was naturally the devil. And I'm like, she's naturally not. Like she's pretty kick ass. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
she's a very strong woman who has very strong opinions, and that's really good because she knows where to make boundaries and to basically be very mature for her age. I mean, even now, like she, which when you think about it, it's like she's the type of person that has a very close knit of friends. She's naturally like dog. She's naturally more to her close knit of friends. She builds relationships. She likes smaller packs, whereas I'm more louder. I'm more boisterous and can be
Okay.
more sociably. So it's kind of like it's different issues, but still the similar problem, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm glad to hear that you guys have a pretty good relationship. Two of my really good friends are twins, and when they grew up, they were constantly trying to steal each other's girlfriends and run each other over with cars. So,
Okay, I'm not saying we didn't do that,
oh,
but
oh,
I'm saying naturally we didn't have the best relationship as kids. I mean,
sure.
to be very fair, I mean we used to beat the shit out of each other
Oh,
as kids do, and it's just sibling behavior. But it also, as we grew up and as we grew into our adult selves, it literally just stopped. And when you become a natural adult and you mature out of that stage, you realize all the shitty things you did.
yeah.
and you look back, you're like, I really shouldn't have done that. And as we're adults, we can come to each other about problems. I mean, like, I can go see her and like bullshit with her and bring her an issue,
Hmm.
and she'll give me an honest opinion, and I love that about her. But as kids, we used to just fucking be natural, enemies towards each other.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying we ran each other with cars or stole each other's boyfriends, because one of us would not be here if that happened. But
Yeah.
it's naturally just we were just such natural like rivals, because we were
Right.
always again like compared, asked, you just kind of put in those positions as a young kid.
Right. I'm always curious about that too, because like I mentioned, I only have one biological sibling, and he's 12 years older than me. So
Hmm.
I did have that relationship where I wanted to hang out with my older sibling, and I looked up to him a great deal. But he moved out of the house when I was 6, and then
Hmm.
after that, I was pretty much an only child. So like I never had any rivalries. I never had that kind of like, and I never had that friend and rivalry sort of interaction. So I'm always really fascinated by that dynamic with siblings. And I imagine having a twin, so like you're coming up at the exact same time, obviously, uh,
Hmm.
has to be really interesting. Um, so you mentioned that you went to private school. You both went to private school, right?
Yes, so we went to a Catholic school. I was born
Oh,
and raised Roman Catholic, but
oh,
I am currently an atheist, and that's the one thing me and my twin do divide on. She's a born again Catholic.
oh,
She really lost herself. Yeah, she's a born again Catholic. No, she's not strict. She's not strict.
sure.
She does defend her right at when I say anti-theist bullshit, and I will be spiteful about that because I do instigate a lot of that shit, and I'll be true and honest about it. And she'll quickly snap back like, "You don't got to be a dick about it," and I'm like, "All right, I won't be a dick about it." Shit. And then so her and I were both brought up with Roman Catholic beliefs because of our mother, who was very strongly handed at the time,
Right.
with both my brothers going to private school, and then they didn't like it, so she opted out of and put them in public school, the same public school I went to. And then she put us, I think somebody had mentioned the school I went to, and we went there from the ages, I think I went there for pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade, and we had the same, me and my twin had the same first grade teacher.
Mm.
And I remember my mom giving me the talk of like, hey, listen, I can't afford this. At the time she was my grandparents were helping when they were still alive, and then at the time it was getting really expensive, and that's when the daycare was happening as well. So you have to picture my mom's running a daycare with developmentally disabled children,
Hmm.
between 20 and 50 kids in there. There's like 5 adults there, 5 to 10 adults depending on the day, because my mom also employed all my brothers, so
Oh
both
yeah.
my brothers and their friends to help out. If you're gonna hang out in my house, you're gonna be doing some work. That was my mom's motto. You're not gonna
Smart.
be sitting there eating. You're not gonna be sitting there eating Cheetos. You're gonna help take care of these babies. That's always been my mom's motto. Even to this day, she'll get on my ass about it.
Okay.
And then with that as well, so she had that, and then she hired up my second mom, who was my nanny, and she was a lovely woman. I remember before school, she would wake us up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock, and she would sit down and she would braid my twin sister and my's hair as we're watching Winnie the Pooh. And then I remember, because I had this long Rapunzel auburn, naturally like reddish brown hair,
Hmm.
she would sit there braiding it, doing all that. We wore the traditional like long dresses. I think we had like white undershirts and then white stockings, and then we had our rosaries underneath it. It was traditional Catholic things.
That is very traditional Catholic.
Oh yeah, and the only thing was missing was the veil.
Yep.
And then as me and my twin sister obviously, went through our own journeys and went through all that, she found herself back to God, and that's fine. I personally had my awakening, I'll say, when I was a teenager. I was dating my high school sweetheart. He was extremely Christian.
Mm.
I kept kind of feeling like I don't know if I believe in him, and then it naturally caused a rift between him and I. And I just slowly, after everything had happened when I was like 18, 19, 20, I slowly just said no. I believed in agnostic, and then I said no, I'm just atheist, because I don't believe unless you can physically prove it and or it's fictionally not fictionally, factually correct, I don't think I believe in that because I don't want to believe into something that's been so manipulated and warped over
Right.
like millennia, you
Right.
know?
Is there like a could you identify a singular point that really put that first bit of doubt inside of you, or was it more something that just kind of happened very organically over time? Because a lot of people will have moments of questioning faith, and then some people will
Mhm.
just simply kind of naturally fall out of it.
So my dilemma was when I was a young child,
Hmm.
and I think I was like becoming into the pubescent ages, and my grandfather was dying of cancer, and I remember seeing him the last time alive, and it broke my heart because that wasn't the grandfather I remember eating wafer cookies with, and my grandmother being, you know, snapping at him like an old German woman would, which was playful banter. And me being a little kid, I'm just sitting there eating my cookies, drinking my milk, telling my grandpa, "No, these are my cookies." You know, that's how I remember them.
Right.
And when I saw my grandfather's sunken in eyes and cloak of a blanket over him, and he was just so sickly, and I kept praying in my head when my brother and his, you know, and his girlfriend, now wife at the time, and that's another case of worms as well. But at the time they were dating, and we were at his house, and I remember thinking very silently to myself, "Please, please, if there is a God, please allow my grandfather to make it to Christmas, please, please." And I
Mm.
kept pleading in my own head, like, "Please, I just, that would be the only thing I would want for Christmas, please." And I remember like slowly crying in his bathroom of the apartment that my brother and his girlfriend owned, and just silently crying and feeling this utter emotion of helplessness. And then I think the following day, which was like November 30th, is when he passed. And that December, I think, I don't know if it was a school day because I remember sleeping in, and I remember thinking I was late for school because our mother and our father had told our other brother who was staying with us at the time not to go on the internet because my cousin had posted about it, and then he didn't want us to find out that way. So
Right.
my brother was told like, you guys are grounded." I'm like, "Well, what the fuck for? What the fuck did we do?" Obviously, and you're like, "Nothing. Go to your room." So we just spent the night in our room. We obviously came out for dinner and then went back in, and then by the mid morning, say 8 or 9 o'clock, I came out, and my mom's crying, and my dad's just sitting there stoically, just, you know, like I said, old Irish man. He was very stoically just standing there, not a tear in his eye. He knew it was happening because they had been taking care of him because he was on hospice, but
Right.
obviously I didn't know at the time. And I remember just the look of utter emotion on my mom's face as her tears just cascaded down,
Yeah.
and I could feel you could feel the tension. You could slice it, in fact, of the tension in the air, and it was just like, oh no, like I just didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think it was true. And then that following March is when my adopted sister, unfortunately passed away as well, and it was just blow after blow. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't believe in this fucking I don't believe in it. Just fuck it, you know.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a bad few months.
Mhm.
Sometimes it feels like the worst points in our life are usually big clusters of that happening all together. Um, yeah, that's very understandable. It's very, very understandable. It's one of those things that I think sometimes when we get older, we find ways to tell ourselves stories about
Mhm.
why those things are okay. It's mysterious. There's a plan or whatever. But when
Mhm.
you're a kid, life is simple, and it should be simple. And people have spelled out religion for you very simply. God is good and God listens to your prayers. If you want, you need to pray to God, that sort of thing. Here's this person, you see nothing but wonderfulness from them. How could God take that from you? You don't have those
Mhm.
convenient lies that you can tell yourself as an adult of why it's just okay, because it's not okay. It's awful. It's terrible.
Given the definitely, but given the childhood I had, it was very. It would be more and less. I'd be more surprised if I still believed in God, to be quite frank with you,
Yeah.
because the childhood that I had, the tumultuous relationships that were occurring around me were nevertheless just I would be very shocked if I was that delusional. And I'm not saying religion is delusional because it's not. It's a personal belief, and I know
Sure.
it is. My parents believe in it, and I always get told if you were born Roman Catholic, you'll die Roman Catholic. I'm like, not if you know what's in my will, I won't.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, your dad's Irish, so I take it he was a Catholic Irish, not a Protestant Irish.
Yes, he's Catholic Irish, and his dad, who's like 100% or practically is 100% Irish,
Mhm.
was Roman Catholic Irish. My grandmother, who is French and German, was raised the same way. And mind you, these are two. His parents were born during the Great Depression, so you can only understand how that was going on with their religious beliefs.
Oh yeah.
Given the riots that happened in Detroit and all the monumental moments of their entire lives, and that passed down to my dad. Him growing up in an era where movement was very impactful on him.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things where you can kind of understand a little bit of the genealogy when you're talking about Irish people. Like, how were they raised? Were they Protestant or Catholic? Because
Mm.
it's one or the other, and they correspond to a whole lot. There's a whole lot of
Hmm.
story behind both for sure. That's interesting. So you only went to private school for a short amount of time, and then I'm assuming then you guys had to go to public school for a while.
Yeah, so it was like I was like a second grader, and then I went because I was told by my mom like, "Hey, I can't afford this. Do you guys want to go to public school?" And I leaped at that chance. I'm like, "Oh my god, yes! I totally want to go."
Why?
And then I think it's because it's like as a kid, you notice a lot when you're a kid, even if you don't fully understand it. You know your social class
Hmm.
very honestly when you're a kid,
True.
because like I would look around and see all these like little girls like dressed up and have makeup and like their hair and have like just almost this cascade of just at the time was perfection for a little Catholic girl at the time. And I
Yeah.
was always wondering, like, why don't I have those things? And then when I later came to realize how expensive the school was, because I remember, going to lunch and being served like like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or like a little milk, and the milk was like $1 or like 50 cents or at the time. It was
Mhm.
either or. I remember. And I remember it was such a low budget school for how much money they were getting and how much the teachers were making and all the other faculty. I'm like, why does this seem off?
Mm.
And then my mom gave us a choice because she could no longer afford it. She wasn't running the daycare no more. She wasn't doing a side hustle. She didn't have anything else to rely on for that besides my grandparents. My grandparents didn't have a lot. I mean, they had some, but they couldn't continue to support that type of lifestyle any further.
Right.
And I respect them for that. That's where their boundary was, and I respect them for it. They didn't have to do it. They did it because of me and my twin sister, and that's perfectly understandable. That's why we were given the option, like, hey, do girls want to go to public school? And I said, sure, sure.
Yeah.
I was more excited for the opportunity of making new friends and doing other things. Granted, I was a very caught on to a lot as a young kid. Even if I didn't understand it, like I said, I caught on to a lot. And I was always a loner anyway. So I'm like, oh, well, this would be a new opportunity. Might as well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's
And
fair.
I remember, yeah, and I remember being a kid and going in there, and it was like the elementary that's literally like 15-minute walk from where I'm from, and going there and having to walk every day, and then just being excited for school. And I think, obviously as I got older and older, I went to the middle school and the high school, which was like literally next to each other. And then I just simply just started to not like it anymore. And that's when I had to have that talk with my high school sweetheart at the time, and then forward it to my mom like, hey, I don't like school anymore. Could I do something else?
Right.
This isn't working for me anymore. And she's like, fine, I'll enroll you to online schooling, and we got to do.
Right. Well, that's really nice though that at that point online school was an option. The
Hmm.
I ended up before I got my GED, I ended up trying to do homeschool, and everything was just mailed to you in packets and whatnot. Did not
Hmm.
work. Did not work. I think
That's
online school probably would have worked better, but Yeah.
With online schooling, how I was doing it, it was a very law strict school. What I mean to say is there was mentors contacting you daily, and you could not avoid their calls. It
Right.
was like they were very strict. Like if you ignored their calls, you would be kicked out of the program, and you would start getting truancy letters and all that happy horse shit, you know. And that's what my mom was really worried about is me not getting an education for one, and for two, not showing up for school. You know, like
Right.
why are you not? What's going on? You know, and her always being the breadwinner of my entire, like childhood, teenagehood, and even part of my adulthood now. Obviously, she's slowed down because she's an older woman, but
Mm.
she's always had that energy that she wants to get up and go, and she couldn't stop and understand, and I would say really understand the entire situation of why I didn't like school anymore and why I couldn't stand to go, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's well, and I think maybe a lot of it too is as times progress and like the more newer age that we find ourselves in, there are more options. Whereas maybe back then when she was growing up, there just really wasn't any other options. Like you do school or you are uh, screwed, for whatever reason, whatever excuse or line that they would talk about back then. How
I
what?
mean, she.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was about to say, like, well, she was raised in the 60s and 80s, so
Right.
I'm sure it was like either go to school or go to work type of attitude.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny to kind of track like how much that like where these things tend to drum up from, where the type of I don't want to say propaganda, but the tropes of you have to go
Hmm.
to school for this, you have to achieve that, you have to do this, or you're not doing anything with your life. And how a lot of them are, some of them are very contemporary, and some of them like stretch back to a really, really long time ago. And I do wonder. I do wonder if it goes back all the way, maybe even to like as you were talking about earlier, the Great Depression. Like you have to go to school, or otherwise you're going to work, or otherwise you're just a bum, that sort of thing. I wonder where that comes from.
I mean, given that my dad's parents were born during the Great Depression, and my mom's parents were born during the silent generation. I
Oh
would
yeah,
say it probably stems back turn of the century when school was first invented. Because
sure,
as I've understood my lineage and where I've come from, the value of education was taken. I take it personally such for granted because I'm like everything's accessible, and then when I look at the other people that have come before me, I'm like, holy shit, they didn't really have a choice, did they? Because
right,
it's like the women were, everybody really was so restricted by what they could do, what they were able to do. I mean, my grandparents, one of my grandmothers had 18 siblings.
right,
So, she came from a tumultuous family, a big one,
mm,
but she came from so many people that there was a reason behind it because they had to tend to the farm, they had to do, the women had to cook, clean, like it was like really interesting to see that. And even when my mother speaks about my grandmother, I'm like, I was asking her these questions, and some of them she just can't answer, and that's understandable.
sure,
And I don't, and I get it. And she just lets me know, like, your grandmother was a very, like my mother, a very stern woman.
mm,
She spoke fluent Polish. She was from Prussia before Prussia dissipated.
mm,
Which would tell you how old my grandparents probably were. And her both her mother and her father were born in Prussia and then came over and then had her, obviously, but some of her older siblings were born in Prussia, and all of them spoke, secondary languages, and all of them had to learn from scratch what it meant to be an American.
oh yeah,
And I think, if I'm correct, my great grandfather Leo, he was a politician in some way here, where I'm from,
hmm.
in the area of Detroit. And then when I hear his beliefs, I'm like, oh, he wouldn't have favored nowadays. He would not like it.
Maybe not. It's I have this. Yeah, I'm getting to this age where I have this tendency to almost want to start to have like old manisms. It's really weird. So like as we're talking about this, I'm like, oh yeah, like I remember when I was very young, oh Christ, here it goes. We didn't have the internet yet, and so if I wanted to find something out, I'd have to go to the library and pick up a fucking encyclopedia and blah blah blah. And I was embarrassed inside my own mind while I was thinking that. But also, prior to that, what if you live in a town that doesn't have a goddamn library? You know, or it's yeah. I think we do take a lot of this stuff for granted. And I wonder if we maybe lose something as a people that we're not very thankful for the ease of access that we have sometimes, because it's pretty astonishing.
Oh yeah, like, see, when I was growing up, even when I left when I was 18, and maybe we'll get into that, but when I left for like a brief stint when I was 18 or 19,
Yeah.
and my dad he always made sure, even if we didn't have the most fanciest iPhone, even if we didn't have the fanciest laptop, he would look at us dead in the face and he'd be like, Sarah, like, yes, Dad, you know why I don't buy you those things? I'm like, why? He's like, because I'm not here to buy your love. You know I love you, right? I'm like, yeah, I know you love me. You know the memories we share together, right? I'm like, yeah. All right, then you don't need that iPhone. Then you don't need that laptop. Those are things that we want, but those are things we don't need to survive, okay?
Right.
Those other parents that do those things, they're just making up for lost time, sweetie. But the time I spend with you as an at-home parent, that is what's going to mean a lot when I'm long gone. And as I'm an adult, I'm like, holy shit, my dad was right. Like, those kids probably didn't have the best relationships, and you know, when you look back at it and see them now,
Oh.
wow, like, it does make a difference.
That's a really good and refreshing perspective to have on it, for sure.
Hmm. Like, despite my dad being old Irish and him being born in the civil rights movement, like early, like I would say in the 60s, he was very moderate when he had daughters. Mind you, he had never had any other kids beforehand. He had girlfriends, but nothing really long term. When he met my mom and he had these babies, he gave up a lot of things. He gave up drinking. He gave up a lot. He moved in with my mom almost immediately when she told him, and we were like these little miracles. I use that word kind of metaphorically because it brought back not only the relationship with my grandfather and my dad, but it strengthened it quite well, and I'm happy for that. I'm happy that I was born to not only provide that betterness for my grandfather and my dad to talk once again, because they didn't always see eye to eye,
No.
and that's understandable, but to also give purpose for my dad to have that, you know, and that's really fucking awesome, because he would always make sure if we didn't have something, he would go out and get it. Like, if we wanted, if we were going to go to a daddy-daughter dance, which we did when we were younger, me and my twin sister,
Aww.
he'd make sure he would ask, yeah, there's pictures. If I had them, I'd be showing them. But they, like, I think there's a picture of, like, when my mom was pregnant, and she went out and she bought these, you know, daddy-daughter dances, and my dad went along. Mind you, my dad's a very introverted man. He doesn't like being around and socialize. He'll do it, but he doesn't really favor it all the bunch.
Okay.
He likes just sitting down, having his cup of coffee,
Yeah.
and then going on like his boxing websites and trolling, because my dad's a massive troll, and he loves and he loves listening to Alex Jones, and I think I've told you that in your streams.
Yeah,
Like, my dad's an active Alex Jones. Like, you'll hear it. So if you hear it, you'll know. Like, my dad was a very playfully enthusiastic man with his children, and when I mean to say is, he'll come up with nicknames. We would watch Veggie Tales and sing "We Are the Pirates" and don't do everything. Like, my dad was very active father, and I really do thank him for that. And I thank from him for not only simplifying what it meant to not have these luxuries, but to give me an understanding of why I don't need that.
Right. Yeah, that's a value that you don't really see instilled very much anymore. And I mean, that's a pretty broad statement I'm making, but you know, at least we don't. It doesn't seem to be in the cultural zeitgeist as much these days, with like very very strong emphasis on consumerism and ease of access, ease of use. You know,
Yeah.
having a parent that really does instill that, you know, importance of emotional exchange with your children, and yeah, I find that very refreshing.
You also got to remember too, he's a stepdad as well to two older boys, so he also had
Sure.
a parallel raising two baby girls, well, toddlers, and two adult teenagers about to be men. Like, he had to be that dad into
Yeah.
a brand new situation he didn't know really much about. He just went on what his gut told him. And as my brothers are now older and they refer to him as dad,
Mm.
I'm like, that's really fucking cool. Like, granted, these are my half brothers, and they always made sure, no, those are your brothers. Those aren't your, no, those are your brothers. Like,
Right.
my dad was always very stern. This, if not the technicality of the relationship,
Mhm.
but of why you use certain language. And what I mean by saying that is, yes, they are your half brothers, but they're still your brothers, so you will still like he's a very respectfully forward man, if that makes sense. Like he values it extremely.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's you craft your family. Hopefully, you have the chance. I hope this for anybody that you do have the ability to craft your family from a wide variety of different sources. Because I think a family doesn't necessarily have to be bound by blood, of course, and that it
Mm-hmm.
can be people that come in and out of your life at a given time. I think it's very natural to have to make non-traditional families, but having the access to a strong traditional family is also wonderful. I think it's really cool. I definitely I myself like kind of drifted in and out of traditional and then into like little makeshift ragtag misfit families and that sort of thing. So I understand that quite well. So you took off when you
But
were 18, huh?
yes and no. That's very much a trick question.
Okay. Good.
Yes.
Good. You can give me a trick answer.
It'd be an answer you're not expecting, Jeff.
Okay. Okay.
So when I was 18, I was dating a much older man, and I don't want to say I was swept away because that's not it.
Okay.
I was very much, I would say, coerced and controlled at the time, and I was swept away. And when I use certain words, I use them very loosely because it's how I became the strong person I am now. So pardon if I say strong words. So when I was 18, I was dating a guy when I was much younger. I think it was like 15 or 16, and he was like late teens, early 20s. And I know I shouldn't have been doing that. My parents were very much didn't know
Yeah.
until shit went up the fucking fan because I was lying to them, and that really disheartened them.
Yeah.
'Cause they thought I would be able to tell the truth, and they're like, "Why didn't you tell us the truth?" I'm like, "Cause I knew what you would do." And they're like, "So this was fucking better? Look what happened to you."
Right.
I'm like, I know what happened. You know,
Well,
sorry. They're like,
I feel like I can relate to this. When I was 16, I pretty much got swept away by a 22-year-old woman.
hmm
Yeah, I was still a child, so I kind of yeah, and caught up in a whole world of bullshit. So I can relate to a certain extent, I think. But yeah,
yeah, because I think he was like 4 to 5 years older than me,
yeah,
and I had known him I know him, I knew of him when I was a freshman, or when I was a freshman, like fresh off the block, and he was a senior, and he was graduating. Because saw him during his senior walk, and I hugged him, and I said, "I can't believe you're leaving!" Like, oh my god, like just being this little naive, trustworthy teenager,
yeah.
you know, this stereotypically nerd girl, as people referred to me. And later on, we connected after me, my high school sweetheart, just ended things poorly,
Sure.
and I was very upset, and I just reached out to him because I said, you know what else, what could fucking go wrong? Plenty of things, Sarah, could go wrong. And the following proceeded with us just kind of really sneaking to see each other. And what makes it more fucked up was when I got older and I was supporting us, and we were engaged. It was really just me buying the rings and saying we were engaged. Like,
Oh,
I was so desperate to have him because I felt like if I didn't date him at the time, and I'm going to use that word very loosely as dating, because it really was just him being a fucking bum,
yeah.
and he just wouldn't do anything. And it was really, and I remember it really extremely pissed off my sister, my twin sister, a lot. She knew I deserved more, and she just, why the fuck are you settling for garbage? And at the time, that's exactly what she said. No fucking joke. She's like, why the fuck are you settling for garbage? And I'm like, I don't know, but at the time I know why, because I felt lonely. I felt like I wasn't deserving of love. I didn't feel well. And then when I reached 18, was in his early 20s, and I got swept away to go live in Indian River. Now, for people that don't know, Indian River is a very, very microscopic town towards the middle tip finger of Michigan. And it's so fucking small, and it's pretty much in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 300 miles away to where I was, my natural home. So I went from the thumb to the middle finger in no time flat.
Right.
And it was very scary, and I was very afraid because I had a very bad falling out with my parents at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna go be with him and his family and all that happy horse shit. And then now I'm gonna use this word very loosely.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna sound really bizarre, and I know it does, but just understand the context. So when I came out of that, like um, after I escaped the first time, I wouldn't say escape, but when parents came, my mom and my brother came to get me, and they say it was an escape attempt. It really wasn't. It was me having to go take care of my dad. 'Cause my mom and my youngest sister were gonna be in Mackinac for an entire month, and they needed somebody here.
Okay.
Or either a month or a few weeks. It's either or. It's close to a month at least. So they were going to be gone for a good long time, and my sister was out working, and she wasn't going to be home a lot, so I had to be here to take care of my dad.
Okay.
And I did, and I ended up meeting up with my high school sweetheart. Nothing happened, obviously, and that really pissed off this guy that I was dating, quote unquote, with. And when I went back, and I'm going to use this word very loosely, I was in a sense of a cult, very much heavy indoctrination of why my family is shit.
Oh,
And
no. Oh, no.
Why my family is shit and why this, and this happened. Now I won't get into specific detail because it's rather depressing and quite personal.
Fine.
But when I came out of it, when I escaped, and I'm going to use that legitimately, when I escaped, because that's the fair word to use in this situation. When I left,
Mm-hmm.
I had to lie to him and say, yeah, we'll be together. That's fine. Like, just because my mom was like, I'll give you X amount of money and get your ass back home. You know, you got yourself up there, go get yourself down. No, she didn't do it to be malice. She didn't do it at all. She did it to show me what the fuck I needed to do to get out. If I got myself in there, I gotta get myself out, type
Right.
of parenting.
That makes sense.
But she didn't know the extent of what happened. Now, me being very emotionally distraught at the time, I did what I had to do just to survive the situation, and I just agreed to do what I had to do to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I took anything that was precious to me, and I brought it home. And I remember I lost like 40 pounds. Now, mind you, at the time I was 130 pounds, right?
Oh, my God.
I went down. I lost 40 pounds, and I was up there. Now, again, that goes into the cult mindset and the heavy indoctrination that had occurred.
Yeah.
And then when I got back, my mom looked at me, and I'll never forget the look she had. She's like, "What happened to you when you were up there?" Now, mind you, she was pissed. She was pissed. She's like, "What happened?" And I told her what happened, and then I told my brothers, and they felt really distraught. And they were like, well, we need to take care of it. I'm like, and I said to them, even if it got quote unquote taken care of,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing physically proving what happened.
Right.
You can argue it, you can legally argue it,
Sure.
and yeah, we can do all that law and order stuff, but there's legally nothing binding them. It's a he said, she said, and honestly, and I said this very much on autopilot. I said to them, I just want to get help. Right? I want to
Sure.
get help for what happened. I don't give a shit if I never get justice. Now, mind you, I was very angry during my process of healing at the time, when I took 2 to 3 years to heal. And I had a very amazing partner. I went from a very shitty person to a very good person, and that relationship obviously fell out because I just was too messed up by what happened to keep it together. And I'm very much feel bad about that, and I feel bad for making his life hard, the person I was with for those after hours. And I've spoken to him, and I'm like, hey, I remember even during the time, I'm like, hey, I'm sorry if I'm too much to handle, like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be. He's like, no, you're fine, you were hurt, it's okay. And I could tell it's a lot of pressure to take on that, because it's a lot of emotions that some people just can't offer. And it's understandable. And after I got help, I try, at least nowadays, not to beat myself up about it too much, because it's like, it happened,
Right.
and I got help for it, and it's not as bad as it used to be,
Sure.
but it's still something that's going to live with me till until my dying days, you know?
Yeah.
And my parents are just happy that when I was explaining it to them, that I got out, that I survived, and that everything was, in their eyes, just everything was going to eventually be okay, you know? They did what they had to do with their adult child, you know, like get me help, put me in, therapy, see a psychiatrist, and then that's where I use the word cult
Yep.
about it, because when I was explaining it to the psychiatrist, it sounds like you were in a cult. I'm like, what's that mean? And then they told me about the indoctrination. I'm like, that sounds very similar to what I dealt with. They're like, that's probably what happened.
Yep.
And they're like, even if it's not like a popular or well known, you were still in that mindset. You were still in that under thumb position. I'm like, well,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
Being controlled, manipulated. It's the it's terrible because I feel like there's always going to be predators out there that when somebody's in a vulnerable situation, because it sounds like maybe you were rebounding also from your high school sweetheart and just
I
vulnerable,
was.
that sort of thing. Yeah, people take advantage. They definitely do. But and also when people come together, we all carry traumas to a certain extent. Some more severe than others. But when
Mhm.
people come together, some people are in the right time to be able to be supportive of healing from trauma. Some people just aren't and just not ready to do it. So that's I could say anything, but I don't really know the situation, of course. But
No, you're
it's
good. You're good.
but it's definitely one of those things where like you can't. It's not really necessarily worth beating yourself up over because we all have like this different time frame that we're working at, and sometimes people come
Mhm.
together, they try, and they miss, and that's it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, yeah. After I think I was like, when I got out, I was like 19 or 18, because I went in as like going to be 18,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was 18, and then all fucking hell broke loose pretty much.
Yep.
And then I just couldn't stand it for 6 months, and I fucking left. And I was in deplorable conditions, and it was just fucking disgusting. And I, I was, I think at the time when I was getting help, I was more mad of allowing it to happen and more trying to figure it out, because I'm a
Mm-hmm.
very kind of a what would be the correct word? A person that needs direct result. And what I mean to say, I like solving problems directly than like the complicated ones, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, you know?
Sure.
Because I was just like, well, what happened? Like trying to get to the bottom of what occurred.
Right.
Like, no, that didn't happen, and then you're just in that height of like denial. Like, no, it's not me. That didn't happen. And
Right.
I'm very thankful of the guy I was dating at the time, and my best friend, who I'm no longer friends with, but I wish her the best, for not only being the reason why I got out,
Mm.
meaning like my best friend was the reason why I needed to leave, because I was like, if I'm ever gonna see her again, I gotta fucking leave. I can't stand not being with her. Now, mind you, she was not the only reason. She was the main reason after she tried reaching out and she couldn't, and she was really scared of what was happening.
Yeah.
And then my mom was also very fearful of like, what the fuck's, where's my daughter type of attitude.
Yeah.
And then with that in hand, I was like, you know what, I'm done. Like, it needs to fucking stop. And
Sure.
then I grabbed a phone and I called and I said, hey, I want to come home. And she's like, you can come home. That's fine. And then again, shouldn't have done this, but I was relationship hopping and rebounding to another guy, and that's the guy who I think I dated for like 2 years almost. And I thank him for his help. Like
Sure.
I was very much an emotional mess, and I thank him for that. I very much put him through a lot, and nowadays I don't hate myself so much for it,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, or loathe that part, but I understand that, you know what, that was very mature of him to not only take that on, but to be quite compassionate about it too.
Yeah. Sounds like a good dude. Sounds like a good dude.
He's
Well,
a very good dude,
it
very good
takes
guy.
it takes a lot of strength to go through that and to come out the other end of it, and it builds wisdom, and I think that's fucking amazing. So, tell me about this artwork that I have posted up on the stream.
So this artwork is from a user. So I have many artworks, and I'd be more than happy to share if, once maybe we'll do another interview and I'll share them. But this
Hmm.
one particularly is of a guy I used to date, and his favorite thing was of Evil Dead. Now, the artist that helped me create this, I think I have it on my phone. I'm gonna say their name correctly because they're like an Etsy artist.
Okay.
And I used that person and another artist called Jax to create the artist, and then another one in Romania, but this one's different.
Yeah.
So this artist's name is Red Shroom Arts. They're on Etsy,
Okay.
and they are very, very professional and lovely. And when I like handed her like a very kind of piss poor like sketch, because after my last ex, who was 2 years ago, us dating and obviously trying to figure out like that situation and like see what's going on and see what I need to do with myself. So I was dating this guy like very very briefly. Like we only went on 2 dates, and his birthday was actually in March, ironically enough. And for the sketch, I made me when I had like jet black pixie hair, and I'm a big and now that I'm heavier woman, I'm more like more cushion for the pushing type of gal.
Yeah.
And made myself look like Ash, and then made him like the male version of Sheila, I think is her name,
Yep.
from the Army of Dead movie. Like I made him that, and I made sure to get the outfit right, the attitude right, the position, the pose, like everything to a tedious degree correct, because I wanted to not only capture how I felt about this guy. Like he was a cool cat. We obviously didn't see eye to eye, and it was kind of like a situation like you said where you can come together but you'll just sometimes not align, type of thing.
Sure.
And this was like a thing not only to express myself of how I felt towards him,
Hmm.
but to say like, hey, here's your birthday gift. And I remember like when he said like he let me down, like he's like, hey, I just see you as a friend. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. um by the way, I have this thing I made for you for your birthday.
Oof.
He's like, he's like, oh, well, thanks. And that was like pretty much the end of it.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh
Yeah.
man, that's rough. I love the art though. I love the art. I recognize it as Evil Dead inspired right away. Because
Yeah.
I'm a bit obsessed with the Evil Dead. A bit.
Yeah, me too. I like Evil Dead, Jason. I like the horror. Being like as my dad made his twin and all my siblings, mainly his daughters, like we grew up with horror movies,
Mhm.
and he has everything on VHS. So there's
Excellent.
pictures of me and my twin sister in like our just our nap, just our like diapers, and we're just chilling like two sacks of potatoes, just watching Night of the Living Dead. My mom
Nice.
would always criticize my dad, like, this is not age appropriate, and my dad would be like, they're babies, they're not gonna remember this.
That's so funny. My buddies Ian and Sherry, they have two daughters, and I remember going over to their house, and they'd be very little girls, 3 or 4 or 5 years old, and I come over to the house, and they're watching just splatter movies and giggling and bouncing on the couch, and I was like,
Hmm.
that's new. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, both my tattoos. So I have a half sleeve, and then I have a tattoo on my thigh. So
Mhm.
one of my first tattoos was the Bride of Frankenstein, which is what me and my twin sister grew up was the Universal movies, which is from the 30s. So I
Yeah.
have the Bride on my thigh, and then as my half sleeve, I have the Biblical Angel, which is where my name comes from.
Hmm.
And where my name comes from is Seraphim or Seraphina,
Hmm.
which is the seraphim of second to God. And part of that therapy that I had was choosing a new name. Then my legal or birth name, as I call it,
Hmm.
it's picking Sarah. And I'm like, I want Sarah. They're like, why did you pick Sarah? I'm like, because Sarah represents strength.
Hmm.
And that's what I believe. I believe that you're not specifically God, but you get to decide your faith. And I will come out of this brighter and stronger and more wiser to what's around me, you
I like
know?
that. Yeah, I like that. That's cool. That's dope,
Hmm.
man. So, with all of this backstory in mind,
Hmm.
you went to you went to college, obviously. After, did you go to college after? Obviously, after you went through the whole bullshit with this douchebag, right?
Yeah, well, we can call him a douchebag.
Yeah.
So after the cult, I got help for I think like it's like a year and a half. I was very in psychosis, so I had to figure out my shit because I didn't have anything. I had to
Sure.
pretty much rebuild from scratch. So I was thinking about college, and I've never officially went, but I've always like signed up and done all the happy horseshit bullshit of paperwork.
Yeah.
And it's always come to a decision of, do I really want to go? Do I not want to go? And I've bounced around the idea. And now that I'm older, I'm like, you know what? Fuck college. If it's a degree that I'm not even that passionate about,
Yeah.
what the fuck's the point of even starting the class? And I
Gotcha.
said to myself, I was talking to one of my friends, and he's like, go to fucking trade school. I'm like, then I'll do trade school. And then after that, that's always been in my things to do
Right.
of every year, besides other goals I have in mind, being a nearly 25-year-old woman, is going to trade school and learning a trade that I know like the back of my hand, or that I'm at least willing to educate myself on.
Right. Right. Something you can stand doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a much better idea than going to school where you pretty much can guarantee yourself that you're just going to be bored. It's yeah. It's and college can be a real slog anyway. It depends a lot on a lot of different things.
It's not even that it would be boring. It's like the debt. I just
Oh
seeing
God.
how my parents. It's seeing how my parents struggled about debt. I said to myself, never will that be me. I don't care how poor I get, I'm never going to put myself purposely in debt to get ahead in life. And
That's
I
me.
remember, no, you're good. You're okay. You're good. You're good. That's fine. You're good. Like, that's what I made that vow very early in my years, never to put myself in debt. Even when I had 12 grand to go to Australia, and mind you, that didn't happen because fuck you, COVID. But I had 12 grand saved by working myself to like a dead horse,
Hmm.
and getting sick and losing my hearing due to not only other issues but an infection that could have killed me.
Like during COVID?
Yeah, so if obviously you can't see me, but if you could see me, you could see that I'm wearing a certain pair of headphones.
Okay.
I can't wear earbuds because I'm partly deaf,
Mm.
and that was due to, this is gonna sound really fucking weird, and if people research it, they might not consider it the truth, but that's fine.
Mm.
I went to see Dr. Chan, who
Mhm.
is a Michigan institutional ear facility, and according to her, I'm the second person with this condition where I had these little like tumors in my ear canal,
Ooh.
to where they were like yeah, legit. It's fucking weird because like when I was 17, my ear would pop, like it
Mhm.
felt like when your ears pop on an airplane, and then it would gush blood. It looked like a fucking murder scene. I remember having. Mm-hmm. I remember
Jesus.
moving. Yeah, it got to a point where I would be hospitalized for it. And I remember moving my hair, and my ear wouldn't stop bleeding. It didn't matter if you put pressure on it, didn't matter if you put peroxide in it, didn't matter what you fucking did, it would just continuously bleed. It got to a point where I was, just couldn't stand it. Right? It would happen at my job, and I remember my mom, who at the time was, helping me out by taking me to work. She could just see this trail of blood, and she's like, thought something happened, and she could see me in the bathroom sink just holding my part of my ear, like, what the fuck happened, And I show her, and she's like, not again, and she's helping me, and it was a very it's a very frustrating time. That's the word. There's a very frustrating time
I
for me when I
bet.
was 17, and not only dealing with what I dealt with the whole situation, but when I got back and went to doctor after doctor, and they just thought I was fucking making it up or crazy or over exaggerating. I'm like, no, something is happening.
Yeah.
And then I went to another doctor, and that's when they found the tumors. And then they took like a sample, and that I don't know if you've ever had shit stuck in your ear, like far in your ear,
Yeah.
but you want to fucking strike someone so volatilely
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I remember a male doctor having to hold me down because I was about to backhand the other doctor as he was cutting inside of my ear.
Ugh.
And mm-hmm.
Ugh. God.
Yeah, and
The ear
they,
ear stuff is like so. It's squick for me. It's so squick. Ugh.
it's okay. It's good. It's good. Sure, it's good. And then given the sense of it, it got sent out. I was really worried if I had cancer or not. They're like, we'll send it out for testing, and I think they said no at the time, but they were still going to monitor it.
Okay.
We saw Dr. Chan. We saw Dr. Chan, and she like looked at me very honestly because she put like the little scope, and she's like, "This is what this is. This is what that is. You have a crop field of these little like tumors," and I'm like, "Am I gonna fucking die? Like, do I have cancer? Do I have cancer? Am I gonna like have brain cancer and die? Like, what the fuck?"
Right.
She's like, "No, but we're gonna do some more testing, because because whenever I was hospitalized, they've used acid, they've, done this, they've done that. They put a little plastic wick in it, which caused the infection, which led me to be hospitalized over Thanksgiving weekend. And I remember that because my general manager at the time stole money in my name, and I got almost blamed for that shit. As I was in the hospital with a little like heart monitor, and they were checking my blood levels, and I
Jeez.
kept
Man.
and I kept pleading. I would like almost be in tears, like, please, it hurts. It hurts. My head hurts. And I threatened. I think I threatened the specialist. Specialist came in, and I told them like, if you don't get it out of my fucking head, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna cut it out my damn self. And I'm like, and I told them this. I'm like, I'll fucking do it my damn self. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And they're like, ma'am, you can't do that. I'm like, I will. This is excruciating pain.
Yeah.
This hurts. And they're like, well, ma'am, we've given you everything. I'm like, you need to give me something stronger.
Yeah.
And they're like, ma'am, we can't do that. And then my blood pressure was going lower and lower and lower. And it was still so incredibly painful. I'm like, oh my God, just shooting me would be easier, you know? And then when we saw Dr.
Rough. That's so rough. God, your pain.
It's like it's the worst pain besides cramping and or like tooth pain that I felt.
Yeah, tooth pain is pretty gnarly too. Yeah.
And then when we saw Dr. Chan, I had a surgery because of because what happened was the hospital that I went to, they put this wick in, like I said, but that caused an ear infection that was possibly traveling to my heart and my brain, which is why they had to keep track of my monitoring, my vitals and shit. And then when I got out of it over Thanksgiving weekend, and the whole thing with my general manager stealing in my name, so I hope she's rotting in a cell, and I know she is.
Nice.
And then that's a whole other can of worms that we can maybe get into. And then I got, like, we saw Dr. Chan, and then she's like, oh, well, what we're going to do is we're going to take all the tumors out, these blood tumors, and we're going to put fake skin in there. And I'm like, well, is that going to hurt? Is that going to, like, I'm asking all the questions. She's like, your body shouldn't reject it, but in case not, we'll take some skin. I think she said, like, from my thigh or some area that wouldn't be that noticeable if I rejected the fake skin.
Right.
I said, that's fine. And I remember I was working at my last job. I had worked there for 2 years. And I remember it was very short noticed. I was out for like a month. I was texting my Australian ex at the time. I'm like, am I gonna die? They're like, no, Sarah. No, I'm like, Sarah, you're not gonna die. You're just on drugs, love.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't feel so good. And they're like, you're okay. And I remember like having him like on, like he was literally in my pocket the entire trip to the hospital because what him and I would do is, even if we were distantly dating, it felt like we were literally like right next door to each other because of how understanding that relationship was. And I still love him to death, even if we're not together.
Yeah.
And we would watch movies, and I was telling him how scared I was and very nervous. It's my first surgery. And then like I woke up, he was still on the phone. I took him with me, and he was up literally when I got up. Despite the time differences, he was there and listening to every step I took, to like every position, just to give that sense of comfort,
Aww,
and obviously,
good
like
dude. That's a cool guy.
Yeah, and obviously when it was like private things, like it was. Excuse me. And it was like something like very private. Obviously, I would mute him or cast like, hey, I don't think you should be listening. I'm going to mute you for a minute and like talk to people. And then when it was a safe public display, like I could have someone on the phone type of thing.
Right.
Like he could hear my mom. He could hear people. He's like texting me. He's like, Sarah, you can do this. I believe in you. I love you. You're going to be just fine, doll. It's okay. And mind you, my mom took care of me as well. And my dad obviously
Hmm.
got me McDonald's the day I came home because he was relatively nervous too. And I'm big thanks to my mom for that, for taking care of me, especially when she had to work. And I, was put under. They went in my ear. They scooped out like a large chunk of my ear canal and like pretty much rebuilt it. Like legit, just rebuilt it with artificialness.
Huh.
Artificialness. That's not even a word, but artificial material. And I like woke up, and I guess I was saying the word waffles to the nurse. I was saying like I want waffles to the nurse.
Yeah.
But I think it was more like I was just so fucking out of it, and I remember just saying like Lee, Lee, or like someone's name, I think.
Yeah.
And then I remember just saying like jargon out of my mouth.
Right.
And then the male nurse is like, "Hey, you're fine. It's okay. You're back here recovering." My mom comes out. My mom, literally has photos of what they removed out of my head. She's like, "Do you want to see?" I'm like, "No." And then she follows to show me. I'm like, "I fucking hate you. Like, I love you, but why are you showing me this, Mom?"
You gotta see your
You
ear
know?
tumors, hun. You gotta see them.
Yeah,
You made them. Come
yeah,
on. That's funny.
yeah. We
God.
later found out it could have been a birth defect that caused that condition.
Yeah.
Since I'm the second person to have said condition, I don't believe there is a name for it.
Hmm.
Or from what I was told, it's just not commonly occurring enough to have. I don't
The human
really,
body is
but
a wild mystery. It could do all sorts of random shit we've never seen. I mean, I'm not surprised at all.
yeah.
Hmm.
And then I remember the sense of relief that my mom and I felt after we had finally knew what the fuck was going on. Like, finally a doctor believes us.
Right.
Finally a doctor. Like, we were so fucking relieved. Because I went to ENT specialists, I went to ear specialists, I went to regular physicians,
Yeah.
I went to a cardiologist, like thinking it's different shit. It's like that fucking what the fuck is that show? That like shows like these outrageous diseases that we have to go to special doctors for, or
Oh yeah. I don't remember the name of the
that
show.
type of.
Yeah. You're like going
It's
in
like
and
the.
checking all the boxes and shit, trying to figure out what the fuck's going on.
Because at first they said it was like an venous malformation, and I'm like, okay, causing the bleeding. And yes, it was partly that, but it was something completely different that caused the bleeding, which was really just the tumors popping, or they were popping, but they were under my skin, and whenever I would sleep or move rapidly or touch my ear at all, the skin would easily be irritated and break, and it would pull all this blood out, And that's where the murder scene comes from, and it left me with very not like terrible hearing, but it left me partly deaf.
Yeah.
And
Imagine.
given what when I was a kid during the daycare, my mom was teaching all the kids how to do sign language. I had to reintroduce that to my life, is to not fluently sign, obviously, but to have a better sense of signing, and or at least to understand people enough to sign. What do I need? Like, do I need this? Do I need that? It was a trip. It was a trip and a half.
It's wild. Yeah, I that's incredible. I mean, I don't know. That I'm just so squicked out by the idea of like ear tumors in my ears. It's funny because everybody's got like that squick thing, right? Everybody has a squick thing. For memory, it's like she has a thing about worms. For me, it's literally anything to do with my ears. It just freaks me out. What's yours? What's the one thing, like if you see it in a movie or something, you just get super uncomfortable?
I think it would be like, I think my little trigger or things like that would just be like, I want to say just traditional things, like something generic,
Hmm.
but I think it really just boils down to just bodily fluids. I can't fucking stand that shit. I hate
Oh,
spit. I hate spit. I hate like eye boogies and like. Granted, I've obviously desensitized myself to a
sure.
point, but it's still occasionally like when my dad like coughs up phlegm or spits. I'm like, oh, and you just gag. You're like, oh, that's your gallon of milk now, Dad. I don't want it.
Yep.
I don't want it no more. That's yours.
very,
It's just
very
disgusting.
aware of backwashes and that sort of thing. I get it. I
Hmm.
totally get it. Yeah, yeah. There's the only other one for me is like cave diving movies, which sucks because The Descent is like one of my favorite movies ever. But like anytime somebody has to squeeze into rocks or something like that, I gag and I have to turn away. I can watch the goriest, most fucked up movie on the planet, totally fine. Moment somebody has to squeeze between rocks or somebody does something to their ears, I'm like, I run out of the room. I can't handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. All right. So we're almost out of time, but I wanted to, before we are, I wanted to ask, what is the most important thing to you? It could be a concept, it could be like family, it could be a prized possession, it could be a value, something that when you close your eyes and you want to think about something that is like super important to you or that you just really love. It could be something as stupid as a prized possession or something as esoteric as love. What is one of those things? Because you can have many.
I think the number one thing that stuck out to me since I was like a special ed kid and just a kid in general, just
Hmm.
and even at a young age, it would be not only telling people how I feel genuinely, but it's mainly the concept of writing it down. So I'll quickly get over this. So me and my pen pal, I have many pen pals, and I write to them, and I tell them exactly like my day, and take that frustration out and put it on words, or tell them how I feel, or and if you were right now, you would see that my room is filled with bins, and with those bins represent a moment of time. And to me, time cannot be bought or sold. It's something that just is. And writing is that is. And what I mean to say is it's the sense of taking your time to send it. Like I think if I were to be quite frank, I've sent like 10,000 letters in 2 years to many different people, people from all the way from Colorado to New England to Australia to New England to everywhere.
Yeah.
And I've always taken the time to say, hey, like our relationship status, everything else, like the person I mentioned about my ex, like I've sent him love letters, and he's like, Sarah, what the fuck is this? And I'm like, it's how I feel about you. He's like, I'm not the emotional type, right? I'm like, yeah, but when I'm dead, you'll love it. And we always joke about that. Or me and my pen pal, who's relatively neighbor states with me and her go back and forth a lot, and we just write stories, and we leave behind a legacy not only for possibly someone else to stumble upon, like our family or friends or anybody who knows us, but it's leaving behind something that's physical, I feel. And I feel that that's something, like I said, is just time. Like the videos you leave, Jeff, like you've not only inspired me, but inspired a lot of my friends. I mean, when I was like, talking about this interview, they were like, "Oh, dude, that's real fucking sick." I'm like,
Aw.
"Yeah, right. It's so cool." And I'm like, one of my people that I discovered since I wanted to do this since I was 17. They're like, "Well, why didn't have you?" And then I explained the story that I explained to you, but a little bit more detail, obviously. And they're like, "Well, go for it, dude. Fuck it. You're almost 25. Fuck it. It's about time
Oh.
you do something." And I've very much value time that people give me, and even the time that I know that I have very little of, with my own father, who suffers from dementia, who forgets a lot, and who just, I know in a sense, just doesn't have a lot. I mean, both my parents are critically in health endeavors,
Right.
to where I know eventually it's gonna be that day. And that's what I've become to understand and take a lot of meaning from, is that, yeah, I might be angry when I was younger. Yeah, I might have, I shouldn't say I might have, I did blame a lot of people for my anger
Mm.
and my bitterness, and all those sensible feelings I felt. But I also understand why, and I understand because I felt like I wasted my time. And time is something I cannot buy back, but I have to look at it as an adult now and say, no, you didn't waste your time, Sarah. You learned something, didn't you? You learned how to be a better person. You learned how to be stronger. You learned how to be wiser. You might have the mind of a 40-year-old woman, but you're not in yeah,
That's great.
I've been
That's
told that.
great. I love this because it, it's a fascinating concept, and I think it's very beautiful.
Mhm.
Time is happening, and you capture it, and you're encapsulating it into like something you're physically doing and making something, and like that's like it's not even really like the ghost. It's like that's the memorial of that time and capturing as
Yeah.
much of it as you possibly can. I love that. I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's really
Yeah, I
cool.
know when I'm long and gone, and I have a little fur baby when he's long and gone, and
Mm,
he'll be a part of that little collection that I'm building.
sure.
That's what I leave behind is my collection of birthday cards, journals that I filled up with my frustration. Just that, like you said, that capsule. Like I'm capsulating it,
Yeah.
and I feel like even when I have kids, like, and maybe I'll have their tokens when they're babies and shit like that. Just
Sure.
continuing to grow this monstrosity of bins of treasure. I call them little treasure chests, and I'll teach my kids eventually when I do have them, hopefully.
Mm,
Of hey, listen, when I'm long and gone, this is what I'm leaving behind for you to learn. Right? You're going to learn from my mistakes as a young woman. Right?
right.
And it's not even really a gendered thing because I learned from my brother's mistakes. I learned from my mother's mistakes. I learned from everyone's mistakes.
No.
But that's the best teacher that you can have on your side is to learn from other people and to understand. It's like taking a picture, right? Or even a video.
No.
You are forever capsulizing your your appearance, your words,
Your
and
life.
will forever get everything.
Yeah.
And I'll have this sense of a ripple effect that will always be there, despite if the internet never exists in 20, 10 years. I don't know.
It's true. You said
It will.
10,000 letters? Y-
So
I'm thinking probably by the time you're in your 40s or 50s, your treasure trove is going to look like that last scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know. It's going to be great.
probably I know. Yeah, I call it my letter to a million is
Mhm.
the mission we call it, and I've had plenty of friends, and a lot of them. Again, I wish you all the best.
Mm.
I'm sorry for whatever I did to cause a rift or why it ended, even if it was mutual. I put my hat out there. I've had a friend in New England. We were kind of thinking about going steady, and I sent him like 3,000. I sent a girl in Colorado close to 1,000. I sent my good friend Monkey, who is a neighbor, stays with me again, for like 1,000 or and they all like say either something so stupid
Mm.
like something so ridiculously stupid or a drawing because we do like little doodles, little fuck off doodles,
Yeah, yeah.
or
I like that.
poems
That's
or things
great.
like that,
It's
or like
it's
poems or things.
analog texting, you know.
Oh, we love it. I personally love it, and my good pen pals love it. Even some in your server actually got some letters too, Jeff. So you
Aw.
might figure out who those people are. And the one girl that I have pen pals with that we, collectively have this relationship with, I think I'm on like box 7, and she has close to, I want to say, 4 to 5,000 letters. Mind you, each envelope carries so many letters because I'm a fucking manic person apparently, just stuffing this fucking envelope with as many letters as I possibly can because
Save on
in
postage.
my own in my own sense of insecurity of like leaving a legacy behind.
Mm.
Even if I don't have kids, I know eventually someone will stumble upon this
Sure.
because not only have we contact because we were even thinking of breaking the world record for Guinness,
Mm.
and we've been contact like trying to get in hold of them and all that, and because we did break the world's shortest letter and the world's like most letters. I think it was like a Japanese captain sent like 1,309 letters to his bed sick wife, and I've sent more than that to even one person.
Wow.
And she whenever because even now she's like I can look on Discord and she's messaged me and she'll like we'll like send photos and we'll collect these and we're like
Yeah.
scrapbooking and we're doing all these little I guess tedious things.
Yeah.
But I know when I'm older and when I have kids
Yeah.
and they stumble upon these things and they're like just like I did with my dad's valued possessions. Dad, what's this?
Yeah.
No, like my dad has old fucking cassette tapes that are worth a lot of money actually.
Mm.
Old cassette tapes, old record players, old old like albums, like laserdisc albums, and like old like records and shit like that, like old techno, like Edison TVs, like
Oh yeah.
things that are from like 1800s, 1900s. He kept these things because these is what he liked, and me and my sister were so captivated by our own sense of discovery that we didn't care if it was labeled as trash or ineffective or whatever. We were just capsulated by the idea of what was potentially possible.
Yeah, it's a story behind everything, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
the older something is, the more the story becomes mysterious and alluring. Um, I have a little boy jumping up and down, literally right in the kitchen over there, waving a plate at me, and he is demanding that I make him fish sticks. That kid is obsessed with fish sticks. I swear, it's hilarious. Well, so we'll cut the interview here. If you have any links, especially to like some of the art that was done that you might want to promote, or anything else that you'd like to share with people, you can always let me know. But
I
I
think they'll.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think the only thing I have to say is something that was I learned on actually on YouTube from Mended Light.
Okay.
It. There's no real links because I mean if people want to reach out, they'll reach out. Just catch me on Jeff's server. Um, but if there's one thing I want to tell even you to you, Jeff,
Sure.
no matter how cliche something is in your head, like even if it's cheesy,
Mhm.
say it to the people that you love.
Yeah.
Because you never know when it's that's and I know this is really cliche and in a moments of demur, but you never know when it's going to be the last thing you say. And what I mean to say it's if like an example I guess would be like to my brothers who got married and had their families.
Mm.
I still send them letters and I still send my niece letters because I know eventually one day it will spark a question and it will leave something behind. Even if I think it's ineffective, it's leaving something for them to ask a question to. Always question everything and always be true to tell people how you feel, honestly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not always going to be positive. Just tell them, like, hey, listen, like with me and my twin sister, we didn't have a best relationship. And I was honest with her about it. Like, hey, listen, I love you. I'm still upset and kind of dealing with the shit you put me through as a kid. And I'm sure I put you through some shit. And I understand that. And I accept why we are separate individuals and we're separate adults and we have our own separate lives and we just
Mhm.
coexist between each other. But I will always respect your choices and I wish you all the best to respect mine, you know?
Absolutely. No, I love it. I think it's great. All right. Well, we're gonna say goodbye to stream, and then
Bye.
we'll say goodbye to each other. So for everybody who's watching, thanks for joining us live. Everybody watching this in the future, thank you very